Good afternoon, everyone. Oh, good morning. Yeah, not afternoon. Today, our school is hosting a Nobel Laureate school visit, and according to its inventor, Dr. Ed Shapiro, the Nobel Laureate school visits serve as a unique precursor to the next renaissance of mankind. Ed came up with the idea in 2008 and shared with Dr. Dan Fan, co-founder and first director of GFK Library and Museum, Nobel laureate in economics, MIT professor Robert Solow, and two outstanding educators, Masoniers once Seashore host and Phil Flaherty of Massachusetts Secondary Schools Administrators Association. The MSSAA board embraced the program and provided the institutional base for its implementation. This remarkable enterprise commenced in February 2009 and so far has brought Nobel laureates to over 70 public schools across the United States, from California to Chicago, Hawaii, Massachusetts, and New York. They bring Nobel laureates to the Massachusetts and U.S. national science and engineering fairs. Our school has been especially fortunate since over the years we attracted attention and hosted visits by 3 Nobel laureates: MIT Professor Sharak in chemistry, Boston University Professor Glashow in physics, and MIT Professor Diamond in economics. Today's Nobel visit is especially meaningful since our guest, Dr. Abraham, co-originated a global movement of the International Physicians for the Prevention of Nuclear War. In this far-seeing role, he made the unparalleled contributions to saving the world from nuclear self-destruction. Dr. Abraham is one of the most generous Nobel laureates, since today's event is his 4th, one in collaboration with Nobel laureates Visits Philanthropy. It is truly an honor and privilege to have Dr. Abraham with us today, and I would like to invite Ed to introduce Dr. Abraham. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Rice. I usually do not use papers to speak to you, and maybe I'll just hand it aside. Regardless what I say, believe me, it goes right from my heart, my mind, and I'm so glad and proud to see you, and not only you, your school made a remarkable achievement connecting with Medford High, and whatever happens in this hall today is forwarded to the other school. So they are with us. And hello at Medford, how are you? You know my name, Ed Shapiro. We have a mission bringing Nobel laureates to connect with the most gifted humans, young people. And the mission of this program is to ignite, elevate your thinking, your vision of the life, to follow in the footsteps of Nobel laureate and intellectual leaders as your role models. What I discovered through my 7-year work in this function was a remarkable resemblance between you, young people, and Nobel laureates. I will explain what I mean. Nobel laureates are extremely curious. So are you. Nobel laureates like to study. So are you. Nobel laureates are extremely diligent. So are you. There is a direct way for you all to become Nobel laureates if you continue the way you are today. At the end of my short speech, I would like to express our deep appreciation to Medford High and Pioneer School of Science, the principals of the schools, the organizers, and invite us all to celebrate our today's event. And I will allow Mr. Suro, yes, to continue. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Shapiro. So I have the honor and privilege of inviting up Dr. Abraham to begin speaking and having a conversation with you all about his life's work and the phenomenal work he did with the Nobel Laureate Prize that he won in 1985 with the International Physicians for the Prevention of Nuclear War and all of his other work, tremendous amount of work that he's done. And we're all very proud and very glad, excited, many emotions running through to have Dr. Abraham here with us. And as you have all studied, researched, and looked into Dr. Abraham, you all know that he's done some pretty phenomenal work. And besides his work with the Physicians for Social Responsibility and the IPPNW, he's also very interested and done a lot of clinical work with drug abuse, which is probably an issue, and especially now in Massachusetts, there's been an increase in drug use and an increase in the abuse of drugs. And I'm sure if you have questions regarding that, Dr. Abraham would be happy to discuss that with you as well, as he's very familiar with the topic. But I want to thank Rocco Sierri from Medford High, who is, I hope, on the other side of that webcam there. I don't think he can hear us because we need to be over there, but I appreciate them taking the time, connecting with us. And this is on YouTube for anybody who wants to click on that link and check it out. That's also very exciting. I'm sure some of the students in the classes around the school are taking a look at it too. But without further ado, I'd like to invite our guest of honor, Dr. Henry David Abraham.
Third hand, because I'm eating a sandwich. This is cool. Am I visible in Medford? Yeah. Okay. Am I visible in Everett? Yeah. That means you're awake. Your eyes are open. Very good. So I'm gonna, I have time. I'm relaxed. I'm just kind of a sick bed, so I'm gonna stand until I fall on my face. And if I do fall on my face, it's just because I have the flu, and don't call me EMT or anything. So, standing is better than sitting. I'm going to tell you a story. Actually, it's a joke. I haven't had a chance to tell this joke in a long time, and it's a terrific joke. It's apropos to being students. There's a very primitive society, and it believes in capital punishment, and worse. It believes in using the guillotine to get rid of the people who are being punished by death. And the first person to show up is a high school administrator. And they say, well, why you're punished to death doing terrible things to students and to faculty, and you're a terrible person, and your end is near. And the minister says, oh wait, no, you don't understand. I have educated thousands of young minds. I have brought them into the greater world of higher education. I've done more good than harm in my life, and so you should spare my life. And the executioner says, second guy comes up. Is a teacher. He said, you are guilty of terrible crime, torturing children and giving them exams and making them feel terrible all the time. You are going to be executed by the guillotines. No, you don't understand. I, a teacher, I have taken young minds and I've shaped them into new realms of knowledge and appreciation of science and art. And I've done far more good in my life than harm. And the executioner says, well, okay, that sounds good. You're free to go. The third guy comes up. He's a member of my organization. He's a scientist. And he's a physician, and he's a student of nuclear weapons. And the executioner says, you have done far more harm than good. You have gotten people talking about these terrible weapons. You've made it more dangerous in the world. And you've helped promote the arms race. You are sentenced to die on the guillotine. And the doctor says, oh, okay, all right. But I had just one request. If you turn my head around upward so I can see the blade, and I'll go to my end that way. So turn the doctor around. He looks up. He sees the blade. Just before the executioner pulls the cord, the doctor says, oh, hold it. You know, I think that blade up there is stuck. That's the story. Now, I think that is both a problem and a blessing. That is looking at something that is clearly about to destroy you, and recognizing that even if you open your mouth, you put yourself in harm's way. That is the plight that my friends and I had when we started this work, almost 40 years ago. That is, no one was talking about nuclear weapons. No one was talking about nuclear power. No one was talking about nuclear radiation or the half-lives of isotopes. And a number of us began at a very small hospital in Cambridge, and we began comparing notes and educating each other and saying, wait a minute, the half-life of plutonium-239 is 250,000 years. That means if you had a bag of plutonium, and you didn't ignite it, nuclear blast, and you wanted it to decay to half its radiation power, you'd have to wait 250,000 years. That's longer than human beings have really been very human. And so we said, what about other isotopes? What are we doing about these things? What are we doing about nuclear waste? Nuclear power plants were being made like popcorn. And so a number of us said, man, this is really a dangerous technology. Now, of course, we have very different ideas about it. But at the time, we said, we have problems with nuclear waste, we have threats with nuclear meltdown, and how can we solve this problem of energy and safety in society that we were beginning to discover for ourselves. In addition, if you make a nuclear bomb, you make nuclear waste. If you make nuclear waste, you have to make a hole in the ground to make a uranium mine. In other words, there's a cycle from mining all the way up to crafting missiles with nuclear bombs on top of them. And along the way, there's radiation and exposure of people to radiation. And of course, along the way, there's that dangerous arc toward the most destructive weapons we have on Earth. And so a small group of doctors got together. We formed a larger group of doctors. We formed really and ultimately a national movement in the United States. And then really smart guys that I was fortunate enough to be working with reached across the continents, to the Soviet Union, to the highest levels of leadership, when they finally got their attention, and said, hey, look, this is crazy stuff. It's dangerous. It's out of control. There are 50,000 nuclear bombs that have been distributed across the planet, capable of essentially ending the human race. Why are we doing such a stupid thing? And so, creating a movement in the United States, created political pressure in the United States, reaching across to the Soviet Union, at the time it was the Soviet Union, and getting them to participate in ongoing dialogue, resulted in the first nuclear weapons treaty in history, and then the first reduction of nuclear weapons in history. And over the 80s, we managed to reduce the number of warheads from roughly 50,000 to approximately 6,000 to 7,000. Now, from a numerical point of view, that sounds like a victory. From a human point of view, we're still in trouble. 7,000 nuclear weapons floating around in different places is not exactly what we want to see. Let me give you a sense of what we're talking about here. I'll push a few buttons here. This is a nuclear blast. It's a famous slide. These are the bombs that destroyed Hiroshima and Nagasaki. This is the blank. This is Hiroshima before the bombing. You can see actually there's a city there. There are large buildings in white. You can see them all around. And this is Hiroshima after one bomb. Oh. Yes, that's right. O is the answer. That's the correct answer for this test. This is Nagasaki before and after Ground Zero. You see the difference. One was a city, one is a desert. This is a temple in Nagasaki. These are some of the injuries that we studied, which I will not get into right now. There are birth defects. There are American soldiers who were guinea pigs for atmospheric testing in the 1950s. The wind would blow, the fallout over the soldiers, and soldiers would be exposed to radiation, and they developed a higher incidence of cancers and other leukemias and other radiation-related diseases. I love this picture of the sheep. A cloud of radioactive gas passed over something like 4,000 sheep or so in Utah and killed all the sheep. So there are three forms of death that are associated, an injury associated with nuclear blasts. First is the blast. Then there is the heat and fire, and then there is the radiation. And each one does terrible things. This is Louise. Terrible slide. I just never got a better picture of her. Louise is a pediatrician, primary care doctor, who understood if that's for me, I'm busy. There was she understood as a pediatrician that the radioactivity of atmospheric tests in the west of the United States were sweeping over the Midwest and east of the United States. And she understood it ahead of other people. And so Dr. Rice said, look, we can prove this, and if we can prove it, we'll be able to create political power to stop these atmospheric tests. That was what she was about. And so she did. And she did it in a very brilliant way. She said, let's contact dentists who and parents who are who have small children who are giving up their baby teeth. Let's collect the baby teeth and let's measure the radioactivity in each of the baby teeth. Strontium-90 goes into baby teeth. It's a very useful thing to measure. Because if you lived upwind from the test, you probably had very low strontium 90. And if you lived downwind from the test and you were a baby, you probably had high strontium 90. And if you did, that would be proof that the atmospheric testing was somehow connected to the radiation in the teeth of little children. Now, if it's in their teeth, it's in their bones. If it's in their bones, it's in the marrow. If it's in the marrow, it's going to lead, as we know about radiation, to higher incidences of leukemia and cancers. So this was a really powerful study, and Dr. Rice and Barry Commoner and a few other folks published this study. At the same time, colleagues of mine published a series of papers in a famous medical journal, which, if you go into medicine, you'll always know about this journal, called the New England Journal of Medicine. And in the New England Journal, they showed, looking at the Hiroshima data that I showed you, what would happen to Boston if a single bomb went off directly over the center of Boston. How many people would die, how much fire, how much blast, who would survive, and what, most importantly, what would be our medical response ability to such a blast. And this was, someone asked me a bunch of questions, which were really great questions. Someone said, what got you interested in this? Well, one of the things that got me interested in preventing nuclear war was these sets of papers in the New England Journal of Medicine. Anyone who has an interest in this topic should probably dig out those papers from 1962 in the New England Journal of Medicine. They are absolutely terrific papers. And they're a little technical, a little doctory, a little scientific, but they're worth just looking at what those guys came up with. And they were just superb papers, and they created a political stir all over the country. President Kennedy was the president at the time. He was the guy dropping bombs in the atmosphere. And that's the baby tooth study. More baby tooth. That's the Pope. We'll get to the Pope in a minute. He had as his science advisor president of MIT, and so he turned to the president of MIT and he said, "Where does the fallout go when we blast it off into the atmosphere?" And the president said, Jerome Wiesner, Dr. Wiesner said, "Well, Mr. President, the fallout comes down in the rain." Well, it rains everywhere. The fallout is washing, the rain is washing fallout into the United States. Within a few months of those reports, that conversation, and other forces, President Kennedy was able to negotiate with the Soviet Union the first atomic arms control treaty called the Partial Test Ban Treaty of 1963. That was really pretty good. Some people argued that, well, it just made the testing go underground, which it did, and the arms race continued, which it did. But at least it got the radioactivity out of the atmosphere. The Pope was very big in arms control because Pope John the 23rd wrote a wonderful encyclical called Peace, which was adamantly against nuclear weapons. And Jerry Frank got the two of us together, and he said, "Well, why don't we have lunch with this priest who's against nuclear weapons?" I said, "Okay, that'd be nice." I was a medical student. What did I know? Well, this guy was the angriest, toughest, most lunatic fringe guy. And I said, "Geez, what about the Pope's encyclical? That's sort of like a little closer to the middle of the road." And he said, "Oh, the Pope's encyclical." I said, "What's wrong with the Pope's encyclical?" He just, "I don't see why he needed 55 pages to say what Jesus said on the Sermon on the Mount in one. I said, okay, all right, I got you. But he was a great man nonetheless. And there's the Cuban Missile Crisis, so we won't talk about that too much, except that it's a low water point in the fact that we almost had a nuclear war because of miscalculations on both sides of the Cold War. This was a map that comes from the New England Journal article that I told you about. And you'll notice that this is where the bomb was theoretically placed. And this is where you are, right there. Right there. You think you're going to have civil defense? No, civil defense. No, forget the civil defense thing. What you have to do is disarm it. You got to get rid of the bombs. You know what? Defend yourself against the bombs with a circle right there. That's Jerry Wiesner. That's the partial test ban treaty. You come into a treaty like that, and everyone wants to sign. And then Ronald Reagan, the best and the worst. He's like one of my dogs. The best and the worst. It's amazing. Reagan was the best thing that ever happened to the anti-nuclear movement. But we continued to work on the country, and we continued to create a strong political base. And that was very important. People were really talking about nukes. People were really afraid of them. People were making Hollywood movies about them. There was the China syndrome. There was the day after. There was we were on the cover of Time magazine and Newsweek. And I was in the New York Times. We were being very successful. And actually, Reagan met with our president briefly. And in the meantime, I was working to help meet with Mr. Brezhnev, and then, thank God, Mr. Gorbachev. Gorbachev was our dove on the shelf. We were waiting for Mr. Gorbachev to come, and he was absolutely terrific in helping us put together long-term treaties. This is what Mr. Reagan liked. He liked bomb missiles under the water, in the air, and in the ground. That was the so-called triad. We still have a triad, so we're not Humphrey. And he was talking about Star Wars, crazy stuff. And this is our vice president on nuclear war. He said we could win one. Of course, we wouldn't win it in Everett, but we'd win everywhere else, according to Mr. Bush. That's Helen Caldecott, who was one of the great and powerful voices early on in the abolition of nuclear weapons. Summer camp. Who goes to summer camp? Does anyone go to summer camp? You guys don't have summer anymore. I heard you used to have summer, but now you don't have summer anymore. So you don't even know what summer camp is, probably. Summer camp is a nice place where there's no books. There are no books. You go tennis and you walk in the woods. It's nice. So there's a camp in western Massachusetts called Camp Beckett. And Camp Beckett was very, thank you very much, Mike Holden is going to help that. Camp Beckett was a very interesting camp because it was an international camp. It had people from all over the world come and work there. And at that camp, there was a young kid named Paul Dudley White. Does that ring a bell with anyone's head? Yes. Yeah. Oh, yeah. We've got some Paul Dudley White fans here. That's right. So that's very good. Paul Dudley was a kid at the time, and he was very impressed with international work. And when he grew up to become the cardiologist for the President of the United States, he said, I want international cardiology to exist. And I want to create an organization from cardiologists from all over the world to talk about hearts, which he did. And at one of those meetings, a colleague of mine, Bernard Lown, met another colleague of mine, Evgeny Chazov. And they worked together on sudden cardiac death. And then one day, Lown said, brilliant idea, he said, sudden cardiac death happens, but sudden nuclear death is the end of everything. I'm going to call up Chazov and try to get him to help me relate and connect to the Soviet Union, which he did. Very hard work, years, a lot of rejection, a lot of trips to Moscow, I went myself. We did a lot of, hard efforts. But we got through to the Russians and said, look, this is self-interest. You don't want to be blown up. We don't want to be blown up. Let's see if we can get rid of some of these weapons. The important part of the story is that Chazov was the heart doctor for President Brezhnev, and then and later to President Gorbachev. So he was a highly placed doctor who paved the way for us to go where we went. So it all came from summer camp. That's Paul Dudley White said, when you really do something big like that, you end up on a postage stamp. That's Bernie Lown. That's Gene Chazov. These are the books by those two people that I mentioned. That's Eric Shivian, who dragged me into this in the first place many, many years ago, a psychiatrist who called me up and said, look, we're going to have a meeting after Alcoholics Anonymous in the basement of Mount Auburn Hospital. There'll be about 3 or 6 of us. Why don't you come and listen and talk? And I said, I don't think so. Come on. 6 people is not enough. And he said, it is. It'll be good. He was right. I was wrong. And we were putting together, this is under the category of probable divine intervention. When we were putting together our organization, Physicians for Social Responsibility, we were saying, how can we reach people with our message? How can we possibly communicate that nuclear technology is dangerous? Well, we said, well, let's put it, this is Shivian. Shivian said, let's put an ad in the New England Journal of Medicine, and we'll get all these famous doctors to sign it. That nuclear power is a bad idea, and you shouldn't have it. I said, all right, I hate petitions, I hate ads, I don't think they do anything, but I signed it. So we went ahead and did this, and 3 days or so before the ad was to appear in this medical journal going out to 50,000 doctors, there was an accident in southern Pennsylvania. Does anyone know what that was? I just louder because I'm wearing hearing aids. No, you don't raise your hand. Just yell it. I'll tell you raise it. The nuclear power plant went off. That's exactly right. Anyone know its name?
Accident.
TMI. That's exactly right. 3 Mile Island melted down, partial meltdown in core number 2 of the reactor. Radioactivity was spewing over Pennsylvania, New Jersey, Massachusetts. My wife said, radiation, it's sweeping over us. They're going to kill us. I have to do something. I said, what are you going to do? It's a nuclear power plant. You can't do anything with nuclear power plants. She said, no, I can do it. She called the Clamshell Alliance. And famously, the clams were closed. And so, nobody was answering. She said, I will volunteer at Physicians for Social Responsibility. And I said, well, you can do that. I like it. It's a very small office. No one's there. No one was there. Our telephone was jumping off the wall. The whole country wanted to know about the dangers of nuclear power. And they were beating us. They wanted experts. They wanted to know about the radiation, the effects on babies, the effects on children, the effects on schools. And we were scrambling to keep up with the data, to give them straight information as well as we could. Well, that was the beginning. And we also were getting calls from doctors from all over the country who wanted to join us. Well, that's the Department of Divine Intervention. It gave us such a jump start. We had an organization. Overnight, we had to scramble to try to make it work. I became the editor of the national newsletter. I wanted to sort of centralize information and coordinate the themes of what we were trying to deal with. And so this is a cover of one of those newsletters, and I wrote a lot of op-ed pieces and such. But this, I put this slide in because it really tells you what a nuclear war would mean between the superpowers. In the United States, we calculated that it would be approximately 140 million people. That's just a number, right? 140 million people. No, that's the country. That's essentially the country. And if you compare the mortality rates of previous wars, the Civil War was a horrible thing. 2.5 million or so. World War I was here. World War II was one of the bloodiest of the 20th century. 2 million people. Well, this is 70 times greater. And the Soviets would have similar kinds of numbers of 13 million. They were spread out a little more. They're not as urbanized. So this kind of calculation was the beginning of wisdom for us, for the country, and as we made inroads, the Soviet Union as well. International physicians came about to reach out to the Soviets. Well, that's me when I was young, actually, when I actually had hair. I like the hair part. I had given a talk at MIT, and I ended up actually, I'm always sick. I have this terrible immune system. I was sick. A few weeks after this photograph was taken, I was lying on the couch reading the New York Times, and I came across this absolutely wonderful photograph of Andrei Sakharov and his wife, Eleni Bonner. And I said, it's a classic photograph. Sakharov was the big nuclear physicist who helped start the Soviet arms race. And he also relented and became one of the outspoken proponents of nuclear disarmament in his later life. And he suffered horribly because of it. The Soviets didn't like that. And so he was locked up in his home. He was force-fed. They did terrible things to him. And there was a picture of him and his wife in their home in Gorky. A lovely photograph. Classic. And I was looking at it at the Times, and I said, you know the classic photograph of Andrei Sakharov? Here it is. This is a classic. I said to my wife. And I turned the page, a couple of pages, and I said, well, and I saw this thing. And I said, you can go classic photographs. It was, I will show up at the Times every day. So it was a kick in the head. And there's a paper I wrote to try to get a psychiatric handle on the arms race. Some of you kids really ask good questions about that, which I'll get to in a Q&A. There's a lot of my stuff here. This is a book that I edited with Chris Castle and Mike McCauley on classic papers on the nuclear arms race. And it was really fun. It was a really fun project because we got contributions from Barbara Tuchman and the Catholic bishops. And the Catholic bishops had just come out with a large anti-nuclear discussion, pages and pages of stuff. And the American Catholic bishops, we were kids, like we just out of medical school. We were barely, we didn't have any, we were junior faculties, And so I said, look, let's get the Catholic bishops to give us this paper or pieces of it. And so we divided the labor, and Mike McCauley had to go and talk with the Catholic bishops. And I said, did they let you in the door? He said, yeah, they let us in the door. They said, whatever you want to do, you just go ahead and do it. So Mike said, I'm not even Catholic. He said, it's okay, it's okay. So Mike went down to a bar, he got a beer, he got a red pencil, and he opened up what was probably the most important document written by the American Catholic bishops in the 20th century. And he cut it down. and he edited it to fit our needs for the book. And that was the kind of openness that people had toward us, which is just terrific. I got to work with George Kennan, a famous policy expert and advisor to presidents. I did a symposium with Secretary of State, Cyrus Vance. I was a kid out of, West Philadelphia. I was, went to charter school. And it was really a terrific and eye-opening experience. In New York, we were able to mobilize 1 million people in the city of New York in 1982. This is the Nobel Prize. This is the Norwegians are very circumspect about their rewards. Everything's understated. So you say this is Nobel Prize. You can barely see 4 words in the program. And that's a bunch of us. We're a lot of us. You know, there were maybe 10 Americans accepted the prize, but we had like 300 doctors from other countries all swooped into part of the deal. And I'm in there. I'm in the middle somewhere. Wait a minute. With John Pastore. I was invited to give a talk to a little town north of Oslo called Trondheim, and that was fun. And I told stories, but it was in simultaneous Norwegian translation. So I would say, well, man walks into a bar, and then I hear, and then he says, I want 3 drinks, and I tell the punchline. And no one would laugh. And then, 5 seconds would go by, and the guy would speak in Norwegian again, and then everyone would laugh. So it was a very interesting, way to give a talk. I had never done that before. That is the Nobel Prize right there. I'm with John Pastore, who helped me write the Constitution for the international group that won the Nobel Prize. And John is an eminent cardiologist, a great human being, son of a pet senator, actually, who grew up reading atomic bomb casualty data and was a member of that commission in Japan. He also reached out to the Sakharov family and brought Sakharov's wife to the United States and was involved in her medical care. He's a great human being. And that's the little thing for the Physicians for Social Responsibility, which is this American affiliate. And that's the Americans. They're all the guys who won the Nobel Prize. I'm in the center, more by accident than anything. But this is really, you're looking at a cavalcade of stars in American medicine. And I was so honored to be among them. I keep scratching my head, what am I doing here? But in the front row left is the professor of radiology who was just one of the backbones of the organization. Behind him is the guy who invented randomized controlled clinical trials. That's the way every treatment in medicine is proven true or false. He did it. He was the guy. Terrific. In fact, he was so into randomized controlled trials, he used to do them at home. And I said, well, what kind of trials do you do at home? He says, well, if you have coffee after dinner, does it mess up your sleep? I said, well, I don't know. He said, well, we randomized caffeine versus decaffeinated coffee, and we kept them blinded, and my wife would take some, and I would take some, and then we judge our sleep the next day. Couldn't stop himself. There's the president of the American Public Health Association. Jennifer Leaning is to my physical right. She's a professor at Harvard School of Public Health, tremendously committed to human rights. She's been to over 30 different countries documenting human rights violations and civil wars. She's just solid steel. And it goes on and on. That crowd is really serious bunch of people. So did we do anything? Well, yes, I think we did. The first and most important treaty we were able to push forward along with the Greens in Germany was the elimination of gray area weapons. A gray area weapon is like the Pershing II missile. You put a missile in Germany, you threaten the Russians. You say, if we don't like you, we're going to blow you up. Well, we don't like you. You have 6 minutes to respond. Well, what nation can decide anything in 6 minutes? Our Congress can't decide anything in 6 years. So it's an absolutely crazy, jittery, nerve-wracking system of atomic weapons. So getting rid of those, which we were able to do in Western Europe and Eastern Europe, that was a big, big accomplishment. And there it is. It's called the Intermediate Nuclear Force Treaty of 1987. This is my favorite slide. We had to blow up missiles in the air. Oh, yes, yes, yes. Blow them up, baby. That's what we did. Over the years, we got the Nobel Prize here. And we continue to do our work, of course. And you can see the number of warheads through various treaties and agreements really came down in the INF world. That was very important. The Soviets were very happy about it. They made a postage stamp of that. That's Kuryakin. We'll talk about Dr. Kuryakin a little bit now. Then we started the START 1 treaty in 1991. Notice there, George Bush, God bless him, signing the START 1 treaty. And in fact, and that continued so that the number of nuclear weapons went from 45,000, 50,000 down to where we had, that's 2005. And it's come down even further. But still, huge number of nuclear warheads. Remember, one of those nuclear warheads, look what it did to Hiroshima. Boy, this ran a thing here. Well, great. Maybe we should maybe you should all stand up and stretch. Would that be a good idea? Yeah, let's all stretch. Yeah, let's all do yoga, baby. Yoga. Oh. Yes.
I'm going to be asking the questions.
Oh, okay. I have notes here, but you can ask the questions. Go for it. Great. That doesn't fit. Just have to hold it. Yeah, I think I should probably sit down. Shut this off.
We can put it right here. All this fancy technology. No grilling.
There's no one sitting next to me. Can I be heard from the multiple sources that are out there? I guess so. Excuse me? Well, that's a good answer. Can I be heard? Is that a problem?
I think that's okay.
Is that okay? All right. I'm sorry, my voice is just not what it used to be.
My name is Amin. I'm a sophomore at Interchangeable Science. And the first question comes from Medford Hive, and it says, the political climate of the United States has been heating up with an approaching election coming in the fall. There are some dubious candidates leading the polls, some of which have made statements regarding using force in the United States foreign policy plans. Should the next president choose to use nuclear weaponry as part of their strategy? And can the physicians for the prevention of nuclear war veto or impact the decision legally?
Yeah, it's a great question. And I think, wow, it's a big question. First of all, there should never be use of a nuclear weapon ever, period. For several reasons. Their utility in military settings is extremely low. If your goal in a military setting is to kill combatants. In Hiroshima, the ratio of civilians to combatants after a single nuclear blast was 11-1. Do we want to be a nation that kills 11 innocent people to kill one soldier? And that's one simple level of analysis. The other, of course, is that nuclear weapons are all over the place. We don't control nuclear weapons in the 7 or 8 nuclear countries that have them. And so what guarantee is there that one of those nations is as trigger happy as our would-be president? No guarantee of that at all. Third, the more nuclear weapons you have, the greater the probability of accident. We've had any number of accidents. an accidental nuclear war. I think at one point our radar picked up moonbeams, and we misread the moonbeams as an atomic attack of missiles from the Soviet Union. And the Secretary of Defense was awakened at 3 in the morning, and he had to rush to make a decision of whether to launch a counterstrike because of moonbeams. And so accidental nuclear war is possible. And then yet another possibility of having nuclear weapons all over the place is non-state actors. I mean, look at the Middle East. My God, are there any countries that aren't killing other countries? Either directly or by proxy. And you're going to have to look hard and fast to find such a thing. And to have nuclear weapons stolen by one of them, or more than one, is opening the door to chaos and catastrophe. Oh, can IPPNW veto or impact that decision legally? No. My organization is not a government. In fact, technically, we are an NGO, a non-government organization. We have no legal authority that's better than anyone, than the authority that you have as voters. So.
The second question comes from Pioneer Charter of Science, and it asks, are you planning on taking advantage of social media to spread the word about the obvious dangers of nuclear weapons? And if so, what group of people will you be focusing on when advertising your cause?
Oh man, you guys are in another world. You know, you guys know more about social media than I will ever know. My wife last week said, you know, there is a thing called Twitter. I said, yeah. She said, take a look. And it was the first time I had ever seen Twitter. I said, I mean, how do you get these things in here? How do you say this stuff? I mean, what does it take to be a twit? I mean, I don't get it. And he said, you gotta do the social media. And I said, you know, I think social media is a tool for your generation. And I think my generation has kind of shot its wad. Our tools were newsletters, books, scientific papers, public demonstrations, talks to the media. But social media, tremendously powerful stuff. And I think they are essentially tools that the disarmament community are waiting to learn how to pick up and use.
Knowing that nuclear war is unavoidable because it depends on the mind of men, what do you plan on telling these political leaders to prevent the building of new and more powerful weapons with the help of the International Physicians for the Prevention of Nuclear War? Why now, out of all places?
Well, that's a pretty despairing question. And I don't believe that nuclear war is unavoidable. I think if we want to survive as the human race, then it has to be avoidable. But we have to learn how to avoid it. And the prevention of nuclear war has to take place on two levels. The first is the way we operate in the United States through our political process. We look at this current presidential craziness that we're all watching, and we say, look, where is democracy? And all these superdelegates coming in to change the things around, and is this guy going to buy the votes of that guy? You know, it's crazy, of course, but it's what we have to work with. And if we've done this already. We've done this in the 70s and 80s. We created a national movement of political power. I was talking to one of the world's great physicists the other day, Freeman Dyson, and he said to me, you know, you doctors did it better than we physicists could ever have done. Well, I think that's true at the time, but it didn't just happen. It was a tremendous amount of hard work. And I'm afraid the work is not done. You guys have to ultimately adopt that hard work and carry the battle forward. But you can't believe that you're going to lose. If you believe that you're going to essentially die in a nuclear holocaust, you can't be in this game. You have to play it to win.
The next question says, nuclear bombs are probably the most dangerous weapons today. It was created, developed by Einstein, Zillard, Bohr, etc., and others who are considered important figures in science. But science is still evolving. Do you think that in the future it would be something that would be more destructive physically and mentally to the humankind, to the world?
We should be so lucky to get to that point. There's nothing that I can see on the horizon that's more destructive than nuclear weapons. But if that technology were to be discovered, it would mean that we survived to that point of technological development by not having a nuclear war. The number one goal should be the prevention of nuclear war. The technology will worry about itself as time goes on.
The next question is about drug abuse. And it asks, why were you interested in drug abuse, and how did the discoveries in that field prompt you to make the discoveries later on?
Well, I really wasn't interested in drug abuse. Early on in my career, I was a pediatrician. I was interested in babies and metabolic disease, and the drug thing just left me cold. I didn't like addicts. I didn't like being hit on for drugs. I didn't like what drugs did to people. It was a terrible field. And then, in my early training, I was caught up in the drug abuse epidemic of the 1970s, and that involved a lot of casualties from hallucinogenic drug use. And so I began studying, because they were in front of me. You study what's in front of you, really. I began studying people who were victims of that epidemic. And in time, that led to people who were victims of other drug epidemics. And I realized that you could take the sickest, most beaten down drug addict out of the gutter, clean him up, detox him, getting him into rehab, and all of a sudden, you had a human being with potential. I said, wow, that blew my mind. Addicts were people, and they could become people once again, once they kicked the addiction. And it was tremendously life-changing for me, and that's really a big piece of how I got into it.
Thank you. With Massachusetts legalizing medical marijuana in 2012, and many other countries already legalizing it for either recreational or medical use, I'm curious as to whether you think that this trend will fade out, or whether there will be more push for legalization. And do you believe that the public is informed enough about the side effects of marijuana usage, or is it more of a bandwagon fallacy?
I'm sure about the bandwagon fallacy, but there's certainly a movement afoot to legalize the use of marijuana. I think medical marijuana is a hoax. There is no medical marijuana. There's no disease that we can treat with marijuana that we can't treat better with drugs we already have on the shelf in the pharmacy. What's with the medical marijuana? Well, the medical marijuana is the camel's nose in the tent. Do you know that story, the camel's nose in the tent? Yeah, people are saying yes, they know this. For those of you who don't know the story, it's a very cold night. There's a tent. There's the shepherd in a tent. The camel sticks his nose in the tent and says, "Oh, master, it's so cold out here. Can I just leave my nose here?" And oh, sure, come on, just your nose. And a little bit of time goes by. The camel sticks his head in. Master, it's really cold. Can I just keep my head in the tent? And the shepherd says, "Oh, okay, your head." And time goes by, and pretty soon, the entire camel was in the tent. And that's the marijuana medical thing. It's a way of legalizing marijuana. And I predict that as marijuana becomes legal, the medical aspects is going to decline significantly. That doesn't mean that marijuana may not be medicinal, but we just don't have the data. You know, what would my friend who invented randomized controlled trials say about marijuana and treatment? He'd say, there are none.
What is your opinion on the current opioid crisis, and what can we do to take steps to further prevent this?
Well, you're touching a nerve here. Treating people with various addictions, I've had my share of deaths from opioids. They tend to be of several kinds. One is an addict who cleans up and then says, well, I think I'll shoot up anyway. And I used to be able to shoot, 2 or 3 bags, and they get really pure heroin, and they shoot 2 or 3 bags, and they die because they no longer have tolerance to the drug. In a similar way, people don't understand the power of prescription opioids, and they seem to be a major player in the opioid deaths that we have. And we have tons of them in society. You have a migraine, the doctor gives you a collection of pills, you take it home, you use 3 of them, and you have 27 left in the medicine cabinet for years. And so that's a crazy social problem. And so people don't understand the power of these drugs, and there's a whole new generation of them that are for cancer cases that are administered in drug packages that are unpredictable, such as transdermal application of fentanyl. And you put 2 or 3 fentanyl patches on and you're dead. So between the power of the drugs, the ubiquity of the drugs, the fact that people forget that they lose their tolerance, you can kill a lot of people. The solution to the problem is better control of those drugs. You can all make a contribution. Go home, find the opioids in your parents' medicine cabinet, tell them you talked to me today, and ask their permission to flush the stuff down the toilet if it's not being actively used. That's a contribution. And if you don't do that, you'll have a tradesman come into your house to fix the plumbing. He'll go through the medicine cabinet. He'll take the opioids, and he'll hit 3 or 4 bathrooms that day, and he'll overdose. So you can actually make a positive social benefit by getting rid of the drugs that the family no longer needs.
Thank you. I'd like to give the microphone to the members. If anyone has any questions they want to ask Dr. Abraham. Here.
You know how some world leaders don't want to use nuclear weapons? Why do you believe that their last resort is to use nuclear weapons, or that's like their first tactic?
Why do people believe that they have,
Like they have to use nuclear
we have to use them?
Yeah.
I think that there are several different reasons. One is posturing. You watch great apes in the jungle, and they threaten each other by beating their chests. Well, a nuclear weapon arsenal is a way of beating your chest, of threatening your neighbor, it's very interesting. It's to a certain extent, it's a form of gamesmanship. We have them. We may use them. You better do what we want you to do, or we'll use them. That's sort of maybe we won't use them because they're so destructive, but we might. That kind of game theory that governments play. Vladimir Putin is terrific at it. He presents himself as a crazy person because he changes his policy every few months, and you don't know what he's going to do or what he's going to say, and that keeps other people guessing and keeps people on their toes, makes people anxious. But it has blowback, because then NATO says we have to rearm, we have to get stronger missiles. You can see how this thing kind of goes. The problem is that, as we've said many times, it's an increasing statistical probability that there will be a use of a nuclear weapon in the future, period. An increasing statistical probability. Now, what does that mean? Well, we can change the probability by reducing the burden and access and power of nuclear weapons. There are things we can do, but the more we have, the more likely unauthorized use, accidental use, intentional use can occur. Yes?
What are some of the side effects of like taking LSD and like...
Side effects of LSD? Let me back up a little bit, because someone asked a marijuana question, and there's much more weed that you're exposed to than LSD. I'll speak to the LSD thing. I know a lot about that, but I used to say, I used to be very relaxed about marijuana. I used to say in my talks, marijuana is a dangerous drug. A ton of it can crush you. Now, obviously, maybe not so obviously, my feelings have changed significantly, and it goes like this. Marijuana is a dangerous drug for a developing mind, and we have good empirical evidence that it makes you dumber and it changes the structure of your brain. Period. If you don't believe me, you say somebody cited my parents' book, but I have a book online which it's a lot cheaper than having me come here. What's the book called? Oh, the No Nonsense Guide to Drugs and Alcohol, and in it online is a it's on Amazon. It has a review of the marijuana literature in adolescent brains. And your brains are the most vulnerable, except maybe infants and fetuses. But your brains are undergoing a dramatic, radical change as we speak. I mean, in ways that are mind-blowing compared to adult brains. I mean, we can chart them, we can take images of them, we can see, on a week-to-week, month-to-month basis what's happening to your brain. It's amazing. So when you expose marijuana to that, it messes up that process. It makes your ability to retain verbal information less. It has a whole variety of measured neuropsychological adverse effects, and it changes the literal structure of your brain, and particularly your temporal cortex, which involves memory. So it's a dumb drug for teenagers. Now, that being said, what about adults? And the answer is probably not so bad. And you can put that on tweet or Twitter or whatever. It's not so bad. There was one study done of Latin American heavy users from the ages of 20 to 40, and there were no changes over time in that group. In adolescence, terrible changes that are quite measurable. So when is a safe age to start smoking marijuana? 25 sounds pretty good. Maybe 30, but certainly not 15. Certainly not 15. That is the wrong time to do it. Oh no, but let's go back to LSD. I didn't want to finesse the LSD question. LSD is a safe drug, about 9 times out of 10. But for the 10th case, it can in fact lead to panic attacks, psychosis, depression, and about 4% of the time or so, a disorder which I describe called Hppd, and that is persistent, potentially lifelong, continuous, 24/7 visual disturbances. I get calls from all over the world every day of people who have this problem, and they want to be seen, and what can they do about it? And there's no treatment, and they'll get better about 50% of the time, and the other 50%, They're in for it. They're in for it for the rest of their lives. They have to learn how to live with it. So LSD, the benefit risk ratio is benefit. You're an adventurer of the mind. How cool is that? Risk. You've messed up your mind for the rest of your life. Well, with that kind of ratio, there are better ways to be an adventurer of the mind. Yes?
Is it true that LSD is unpredictable depending on who you are? Because I've heard on some people it doesn't have no effects. Like you don't get any side effects at all compared to somebody else who would take it and go crazy.
Yeah, well, the answer is there's no way to predict that, and it's a very variable drug, and you don't know how it's going to go. That's right. The metaphor I use, which is really this is a tweet or something. Using LSD is like playing Russian roulette with a drug instead of bullets. You're spinning the barrel, and hey, maybe nothing will happen, and maybe something will happen.
How do you safely get rid of bombs?
How do you get rid of a bomb?
Yeah.
Well, that's the least of our problems. Bombs have different components. There's a delivery system. You saw the rockets blowing up. We could blow those up. That was easy. Then we have the mechanics. That is a little more carefully disassembled. And then we have the radioactive material. That goes off if there's a blast, which compresses it. So you don't want to do that. The bomb material becomes less dangerous as it becomes divided, because the nuclear chain reaction depends on what is called a critical mass. You have to have enough of the stuff together so that it will explode. So you divide that. So then you have a very tough question. Is what do you do with the radioactive material that can last for hundreds and thousands of years? And that's a problem that we have been struggling with for a long time. But whatever answer we come up with, it's better than having a bomb. Yes?
You know how you said that, statistically speaking, that there will probably be a nuclear weapon used? Well, what research has been put into the case that it ever is used, like a way to clear up radiation or fallout shelters, for instance?
I'm not sure I get the question. You're assuming if a nuclear weapon is going to be used,
Yeah.
can we prepare for it? Is that sort of what you're asking? Can we handle
Yes.
that? Okay. Well, suppose I was going to hit a pop ball in the air, and your job was to catch the pop fly, in your glove, right?
Yeah.
But I wasn't going to tell you exactly where in the world I was going to hit that pop fly. How good of a catch could you make?
Odds are I wouldn't catch it.
What's that?
Odds are I wouldn't catch it.
Odds are, that's right. That's right. Odds are that you wouldn't catch it. And that's the problem. These things are, if there was only one bomb that the Soviets had, and they could hit, well, even then it would be the pop fly problem. They could take out any city, and how many hospitals, how many doctors, how many ambulances, how many fallout shelters. It's crazy. There was a crazy guy in the Reagan administration, T.J. Jones, and he was involved in civil defense planning. And he said, we're all going to make it. We're all going to survive the nuclear war. I said, great, how are you going to do it? He says, we're all going to dig a hole. I'm serious. We're all going to dig a hole, get into the hole, and pull a door over ourselves and pour dirt on top of the door. He says, it's the dirt that does it. I think disarmament is a lot easier. Yes?
Is there a way that the average person could help prevent nuclear war?
Yes, absolutely. First of all, let me give you a little injection of power. You're not an average person. Forget it. You're a person. And what you choose to do or not do makes a difference. There's a, I'm finishing a book now, which called My Nuclear War. And in the book, I close the book with a story from the Talmud, the Jewish book of wisdom. And in the Talmud, there is a story about God looking at the earth and what trouble the human race is in, and it says, look, I'm too busy, I can't save the human race, I have to delegate. So I'm going to send to Earth 36 people. Yeah, he calls them in the Talmud the Tzaddik Cain. And the Tzaddik Cain, the chosen people, 36 people, their job is to save the world. But because people are vain and arrogant and they don't get along too well with each other, God is very smart. He says, I will send them to Earth without telling them who they are. And so that's the story. So I like to think of that story because it may be that one of those 36 people whose job it is to save the world is in this room. Maybe it's you. And so there's no way to tell until you take steps and act. Oh, sure. I will repeat the question. I'm sorry. The question was what? The last question was, what can an ordinary person do? Average person. Average person. And I said, look, you're not an average person, and you may be a really important person. So, yes. You're a double dipper. You gotta wait, baby. Could you stand, please?
I was wondering how much popularity your organization has gained in the past years.
Popularity. Well, it's a good question. We never really did it as a popularity contest. We did it to raise the level of political discourse in the country and in the world. And we were, at our peak, we were very popular. But I think in recent years that has gone downhill. Because of one very important fact. Nuclear weapons are not a part of common political discourse now. No one thinks about this stuff. And we think about, well, we've had those treaties, we have fewer weapons, we'll learn to live with it, we'll love the bomb, and nothing bad will happen. And it's a kind of a very naive and dangerous attitude. One of my colleagues, the psychiatrist Bob Lifton, says we call that nuclear numbing. We sort of get numb to the whole idea of having everything blown apart, but it's still there, and we still need to do it. Okay. Did you ask her to ask the question? Okay.
What's the difference between a nuclear and atomic bomb?
No difference.
They're the same thing.
No difference. Yes? I'm sorry, you have to be a little more loud, please.
Would chemtrails be an example of nuclear power? Why or why not?
With chemicals?
Chemtrails.
We'll have a mic on her.
Would chemtrails be an example of nuclear power? Why or why
I don't know what the noun is. Would chemicals? Oh, you mean chemicals?
I mean, like, it's basically chemicals in the air.
Oh, trails of chemicals.
You got me. Say, you know, we have a way to solve this problem. Say the question another way.
With chemicals in the air, from like air, or from like air power, like airplanes and such, be an example of nuclear power? Why or why not?
Would chemicals in the air be an example of nuclear power? Why and why not? Or why not? Okay, let me think about that. Well, you mentioned airplanes. Airplanes burn jet fuel. They create carbon dioxide. Carbon dioxide increases the greenhouse effect. That contributes to global warming. That has little to do with nuclear power. Actually, it's interesting. Now that I think about it a little bit out loud, it's not an interesting question. Fossil fuels, the most important chemicals that we have in the air right now are the byproducts of fossil fuels because they're contributing to global warming. Nuclear power has been argued as a safe alternative to adding to the burden of carbon dioxide greenhouse effects. And that's an intriguing argument. I spent years of my life fighting nuclear power, and I may be wrong in that regard. The major problem with nuclear power still is the major problem. We don't have any good way of getting rid of the waste, and the waste can be reprocessed by bad dudes into nuclear weapons. So there is that kind of connection that, that we need to solve technically and politically to make nuclear power safe.
Next question from Medford High. They ask, do you think this desensitization of nuclear weapons is beneficial or detrimental to our survival? Why?
Wow, that's a great question. Desensitization is a good word. I like that word a lot. No, it's horrible. It's horrible. There's a classic movie I recommend that you all see that you haven't seen yet, perhaps, called Dr. Strangelove, or How I Learned to Love the Bomb, and the great funny satire. And the underlying satire is, well, the bomb is cool. I love the bomb. I'm able to live with the bomb. Well, the answer is so far so good, but the odds are against us. And so being desensitized to nuclear weapons, I think, is the wrong way to go, and a very dangerous political attitude. Yes?
Alright, so is it possible that like the nuclear warheads could be going like up, like political leaders like building them like underground, and we just don't know about it?
Is it possible that people are cheating in international treaties? Cheating is always possible in a treaty, but we have very good evidence that if someone has a nuclear bomb that they are working on, we know about it. It's not that we just know. We have all kinds of technology. In my newsletter, for example, I ran an article by a scientist from Stanford, Wolfgang Panofsky, and Panofsky showed us how we could detect a nuclear bomb being tested underground. And we can differentiate that by its seismic signature. And differentiate that from an earthquake, for example. So we could detect a bomb as small as a kiloton of explosion underground and anywhere in the world, and we do. And so, so if you want to build a bomb, you're going to have to test it. If you're going to test it, it's going to have a signature somewhere in the world, which the whole world knows about.
So they're not doing it.
So what?
So they're not doing it.
Well, if I'm sure governments are doing all kinds of terrible things without telling me. The probability of them testing a secret weapon is and getting away with it without us knowing about it, extremely low. That's how I would put it. Yes, in the back?
In your article that you stated that you face skepticism and indifference, how so?
If you ask me a question with your hand over your mouth, then I'm going to answer the question with So can you please give that to me with the mic?
In your article, you stated that you faced indifference. How so?
I've written many articles. Which article is it? Oh God, I don't remember that. Where'd you read this article?
The school provided it.
Oh, the school. Okay, all right. But it's a great question. It is, and that is, what if no one really cares? What if people are indifferent to your act, to what you're doing? And I have a great answer for that. What does it take for someone to be happy? Give me a few answers.
Food all day long.
Food.
All day.
Food.
Every
Yeah, you'll get past that face. Right now, he's hungry. I know that. I know that answer. Anything else besides food? Actually, more food. Well, there's sex too. Come on, there's sex, right? Sex. Okay. Besides food and sex, anything else? Is that it? You guys are all in? Nothing else?
Yeah,
all right, back there. Basketball. All right, basketball. A 3-point shot, right? Oh, all right. A slam dunk. Okay. All right. Any other? No, I need to hear this. This is a really important answer.
But school.
Books.
School makes me happy.
Does it? You suck.
Oh man. Softball makes me happy.
All right. Softball, school. Anything else?
Donald Trump.
Okay, Donald Trump, I heard. Anything else?
Your parents. Homework.
Homework?
Hey, go.
Take this guy out and shoot him. What a fake. What else makes you happy? Stand up and say that. Put the mic on that girl. Give her a mic.
Doing what you love.
Absolutely.
I love food. I love eating.
All right, well, go for a sandwich, baby. Don't let me stop you. Okay. It's a really important answer. It's the most enduring answer besides the food. The most enduring answer that I've heard. Basketball, good for about 20 years. Doing what you love for the rest of your life. If you find passion, even if the world is indifferent about your passion, you stay with that passion and you live for that thing and you make progress with your passion. That is the essence of happiness that I have observed in many, many years and many, many people. So when we were starting with our anti-nuclear work, we were nobodies in the basement of a little hospital. And then within 7 years, took a while or so, we had 1 million people amassing to join us in New York City, and hundreds of millions in the country and in the world. So passion and persistence are really, really important things. And one of the questions was, what about being a medical student? What advice would you give a young medical student? Same exact thing. Here's a great example. In the book, my nuclear war book, I review the career paths for 30 years of the 5 or so people who helped me start this organization. And it was 30 years, where did they end up? Did they end up in a gutter or a little clinic, in the White House? I mean, where did they end up? Well, where they ended up, and these were just folks who came off the street to help us. They ended up as the leaders, the creme de la creme of American medicine. One is a endowed chair at the RAND Corporation in research. One is a professor of cardiology. One is a professor of public health. These are like the best of the best. And they didn't know they were going to do the best of anything. They just were passionate people, committed to hard work. That's my answer.
I have a question from Dr. High. They said, when will this arms race stop? Will it, or is it never ending?
Nothing stops unless the human race stops. Everything is ever going, and one needs to be eternally committed to the process of preventing ourselves from blowing us and others up. That's an ongoing battle, and that's the nature of evolution, and perfectly good. This is a good example. Many years ago, when I was an adult, I took up the violin with one of my children, and I was an adult. And if you take up the violin as an adult, you're never going to be Jascha Heifetz, never. And so I still play the violin. I played last night, in fact. And every day I play, and every day I tell myself, "Oh, that sounded terrible. Oh my God, I'm so far from being good. I'll never be good. I'll never solve the problem of the violin." And then I realized, well, that may be true, but every day I work at it and I get better. I think the arms race is a similar kind of a problem. It'll never go away. Every day, if we can work on it, we can make it better. But we'll still have the fact that people hate each other, people want to destroy each other, people think that murder is a solution to politics. They're all evolutionary goals. There's a great quote from one of the fellows that we work with, Jonas Salk. Actually, no, it wasn't Jonas who said that. It was a behavioral psychiatrist. And he said, no, go back to Salk. Salk had it right, and Salk said it. Salk said, we have to learn how to, as a people, we have to learn how to overcome evolutionarily disadvantageous thinking. We have to figure out ways to not kill ourselves. And that's our challenge. And unfortunately, technology is moving very fast, faster than our ways to govern ourselves, and that's the tension that we have. Yes.
Do you believe that with the development of new technologies that something will eventually replace nuclear weapons, such as kinetic bombardment?
I'm sorry, something will replace nuclear weapons?
Will eventually replace nuclear weapons.
Well, I don't have a crystal ball. If I were in the 19th century and someone described nuclear weapons to me, I would have said, what are you talking about? And only in the mid-20th century did special relativity theory come along in the 20s or so, and or even before that. And Einstein said, gee, matter can be turned into energy, and a tiny little bit of matter can be turned into an enormous amount of energy. And that was the beginning of the atomic age. That only a small number of people really understood what that meant in the 20s and then the 30s and then the Manhattan Project and then the arms race, and here we are. But I can't predict where science will take us. Not that smart. Yes, I'm sorry.
If a bomb was shot in the air already, is there a way we can stop it without having it affect our atmosphere?
If a bomb were detonated in the atmosphere, once it's detonated, it's detonated. The explosive force, the velocity of particle movement, the heat, the dispersal of radiation moving at the speed of light, which is what we're talking about, speed of light, gamma radiation. No, we're not going to stop that. That's out. So that's what we have.
Who really got you into studying bombs?
Who got me into studying bombs? Great question. I think childhood experiences are the really the big ones that shape us in time. And I grew up in in the 50s, and we had fallout shelters, and we had air raids, and we were going to protect Philadelphia from a single bomb. And I was in Philly. Ignited over the city, and we did that by going to room like this, a basement, you know, and we sat there for 20 minutes, and then the air raid siren would start again, and we know it was all clear, and we'd go back to our classroom, and everyone felt safe. It felt like Catholic confession. It felt clean and protected. And then one day, I had no school, and it was a school day, but I had no school. And the air raid siren went off, and I was out playing in the middle of like a street. And there was no basement to hide in. There was no teacher to protect me. And I was a little kid, and I heard air raid. And I felt totally vulnerable to a non-existent threat. But I never forgot that vulnerability. And at a time, I learned that vulnerability was real, and that I would have been destroyed instantly, like those people in Hiroshima. And then I gradually, well, okay, I'll give you a slightly longer answer. I grew up in a black neighborhood. My family was very, my father in particular was strongly supportive of radical black politics in Philadelphia, including Father Divine and these guys. And so I grew up very sensitive to the Jim Crow laws in the South, where I actually was discriminated against, and the Civil Rights Movement. So I was into that. I thought it was a good idea. I marched with Martin Luther King, and so he was the man. So, but then the Vietnam War came along, and King changed gears from civil rights to human rights and the anti-war movement. And I got drawn into the anti-war movement as a student. I was a young student. I didn't lead anything. I was just marching along with everybody else. And so from anti-war positions, I went to medical school, and then the New England Journal stuff came. I saw what happened in Hiroshima. I read John Hershey. I had lunch with the priests. I had lunch with the psychiatrist who said, you know, nuclear weapons are terrible. And I said, they are. They really are terrible. And I began my path one step at a time from there. Yes?
Do you think banning a certain type of people from a country will...
I'm sorry?
Do you think, like, banning certain people from a country will...
No, just the opposite. I believe just the opposite. Let the record show. Open the doors. Let the Syrians in. Let everyone in. This is the United States. We have space. We have culture. We have people. We have. Didn't work. we have opportunity, and we are a nation of immigrants. And this phobia that we have, that we're going to let the terrorists in, and it's crazy. We have the FBI, we have police, we have ways of protecting ourselves. But more importantly, we have to be stewards of the country. It's a shame, it's a crime that we don't take more immigrants into the United States. My grandparents on both sides are immigrants. I would not be here if the creepy ideas of anti-immigration that we have now existed in the teens and 20s of the last century. It's crazy. It's crazy stuff.
How does the radiation from like nuclear warfare affect like other organisms other than humans, like animals and
That's a really good question. It affects it in all different kinds of ways. The more complicated the organism, the more likely radiation is going to do terrible things. So mammals, one of my colleagues, Kostas Zippas at MIT, is a Greek guy, actually, immigrant, a Greek guy, who would give a lecture on the destruction of the ozone layer, increasing the brightness of light following nuclear weapons, one possibility, plus outcome. And he said, and he would give his talk, and it was just an amazing talk. He said, we would wear sunglasses But the animals, they would not wear sunglasses. And the animals would all be blind. Yes, in the back? She's more back than you are.
Other than Einstein's theory of relativity, do you think there were more ideas that led to the development of nuclear weaponry?
I'm sorry, I got the Einstein's theory of relativity, but I missed the second half of the sentence. A mic would be good.
Other than Einstein's theory of relativity, do you think there were more ideas that led to the development of nuclear weaponry?
More what of nuclear? We have this language barrier going. Maybe it's my hearing, but I gotta turn. Wait a minute, I got it. I'm wearing these hearing aids, right? I can crank them up. Hold on, this is gonna be awesome. I'm gonna knock out my Oticons. I had them down low so I wouldn't hear my wife. Oh God, now. Killing me. Okay, try again.
Other than Einstein's theory of relativity, do you think there were more ideas that led to the development of nuclear weaponry?
More ideas that led to the...
To develop?
Yes, absolutely. Science is... That's a great question. It really is interesting. Science seldom... It was too loud. I can't even stand my own voice. I'm going to crank it down now. Science is seldom proceeds by a single discovery. Even the great discovery of Crick and Watson of the structure of the structure of DNA was the result of great experimentation year after year. There's a question here about why I was interested in physiological chemistry, and I'd like to sort of weave that into the answer here. When I was in medical school and when I was in college, in fact, the chemistry of nucleic acid, the chemistry of life, was being teased apart, one experiment after another, and they were brilliant experiments. And in fact, if you wanted to get a Nobel Prize, do one of those experiments, because that was, do a seminal experiment in DNA. And the coup de grace was, of course, Crick and Watson's helical structure. But even after that, there were great labs coming up with great studies. When I was at NYU, as an undergraduate, as a college student, there was Nobel Prize work going on down the hall, and I was too dumb to understand what it was. But one great piece of the puzzle came after another. That's how science proceeds, and that's certainly how nuclear science has proceeded. Madame Curie discovering radiation, Einstein, Bohr, the Bohr atom, Hans Bethe. I mean, these are great contributions, unfortunately great in some ways and horrifying in others. So yes, science is not perceived by a bolt of lightning from the sky. Usually it's one piece of the puzzle that comes after another. Yes?
You said that the half-life of plutonium is like 250,000 years. Is there a possible way to speed up the half-life of like other, radioactive materials?
Well, you could. I guess. I'm a little far from my small particle physics, but you could possibly, for example, split up an isotope with a neutron or gamma radiation, and break it up and change its core nuclear properties. That might change its half-life. But I can't remember if that necessarily would lengthen the half-life or shorten it. So, I don't know. Yes.
Why did he choose pediatrics as your specialty?
Oh, pediatrics, yes. I was going to be a psychiatrist because I thought that was the most interesting broad field. And then I rotated through pediatrics, and I loved all the children. The kids were just terrific. They would do things that the other patients wouldn't do, and they were just wonderful. And so I just fell in love with the children. And one of my mentors, who was a psychiatrist, was helping me along to become a psychiatrist. I felt very crestfallen, and I went to report to him that I was leaving the field to become a pediatrician. And he said one of the wisest things that a psychiatrist has ever said to me. He said, "Oh, don't worry." He said, he's a British guy. He said, "Don't worry. There's no difference between the fields." And I thought that was terrific. And it was so insightful, because in pediatrics, it's all about growth and development. And in psychiatry, it's all about growth and development that's happened. And so that was the connection. I like that a lot. And we answered every question under the sun. Oh, okay.
In 1985, you said that there were, in your article, it said that there was 24 atomic bombs being added weekly, and now that it's 2016, how many atomic bombs are being added to the world arsenals?
That's a good question. Closer to zero. I really would love to see that article, because I don't even remember saying that. But it sounds good. But it was. But you see the curves that I showed you, and they certainly were increasing in 1985. Absolutely right. So there's that figure to analyze. We have now in place strategic arm limitation treaties for the first time ever, and so we have reduced the number of warheads to about 6,000 to 7,000 per superpowers. They're not going up. At least legally, they're not going up. I can't tell if cheating is going on, but if they are cheating, they're not testing the bombs. So that's good. I mean, it's an accomplishment. I'm proud of that accomplishment. But it's like my violin playing. It still sounds horrible.
So we just have time for one more question. Make it a good one. One more question.
He gets the question because you're sitting way in the back, and he's braver. See, the people who sit up front, they're more timid in the back. But you can ask me afterwards. A timid person can ask me afterwards.
Can you explain like what aspects of like a nuclear bomb are so bad?
I can't hear you.
My fault. Can you explain what parts of like the nuclear bomb are like so bad for like humans and stuff? Answer my question. I want.
Well, you know, I would. The easy answer is to say all aspects are dangerous. But in fact, if you think about where a nuclear bomb comes from, there's like 6 or 7 steps. Detonation, very dangerous. We all know that. But there are steps before that which are not understood to be dangerous, but are, like mining for uranium, like processing uranium, like milling it and turning it into yellow cake, centrifuging uranium and making it bomb-grade material, then synthesizing it into a bomb, then test it, and then ultimately detonation. So you have all of those steps. Now, how do you achieve arms control? You crunch down every single one of those steps. Every single one. The probability mathematically of ending up with a bomb in the end becomes very, very low. We've done testing, we've got rid of warheads, but there's a lot more work to do. All right, and that was the last question, but if you have other questions, you can come up and ask me face to face, and I'm happy to do it.
We're taking time to come to our school. We do have a few small tokens of our appreciation for you. Wouldn't mind, and we'd be happy to carry them for you. So, Mr. Exum would like to. And so we would like to present some gifts, and then we would like to take a group photo with all of our lovely students. First.
Everybody?
Everybody.
Every single student here?
Just students. Not every.
Nah, yo. I want to hop in there.
What's this?
And as always, we want to thank Dr. Ed Shapiro for his contributions and bringing the Nobel laureate to our schools and our history as well. And maybe just one group at a time. Let's go with the first 2 rows. You guys come on up here so we can take that nice, lovely group picture.
Ali, put your stuff down.
Yo, you're so smart.
Row by row, the next 2 rows, please.